Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. The time is 3:02 p.m. Continuing our fiscal year 23 budget deliberations. We're proceeding this afternoon with the sheriff's budget. Attending are Commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Do we have any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Moving on with our one and only item, which is a review of the fiscal 23 budget, sheriff's budget. And so before we start, or as we start, Brandy, can you give us a snapshot as to where we stand overall?
The overall, how much you have left to balance.
Yes, please.
Yep, give me 1 second to open it. So just taking the 3% increase, you have 5.4 million left to cut.
Okay. Oh, so you're not putting it up there, okay. 5.4 million left to cut, okay. So where we are, and you probably heard this last week, but it bears repeating. We have a placeholder that Sylvia inserted with regard to wages for fiscal year 23, beginning in October, which is about $6 million unloaded. So loaded, we're looking at potentially 7.5 mil. Speaking for myself, I view that as a very, very high priority, and that's right across the board, addressing all, are we still at 800 employees? And so that for me is the objective, is to be able to implement that. And that is included incidentally in the $5.4 million deficit. But that also means that we have to take another look at our B and our C budgets, because clearly, in plain English, we have to cut. If we don't cut, we can't implement these increases. And that's where we have to make some tough decisions as we go along. And so today we're focusing, for this session, we're focusing on the sheriff's budget. And so what I'd like to do, and obviously Bill and Leslie can jump in, is the two areas that I'm looking at here with regard to the sheriff's budget is personnel at I'm just going to round this off, 1.76 million. And the B budget is fine because you've got 897,000 in there, but a good chunk of that is the jail medical, which I think is taking up about $600,000. The other area that I think maybe we can look at is the 1.875 million, which is the vehicles, not just the vehicles, but the vehicles that go along with the 10 patrol deputies that I referenced earlier. So between those two, we've got $3.5 million. What I would like is maybe for you guys to go back and take another look at this, because we have to make some adjustments. If we don't make these adjustments, we got a problem, because we're not going to be able to implement the $6 million or $7.5 million of wage increases. So your thoughts are welcome.
Well, my thoughts are that I'd rather the sheriff's office do that kind of rather than the board of commissioners.
Yes, yes.
You know what you can live with and what you can't. And I think it's a time for hard choices.
Leslie?
Yeah, when I'm looking at open position reports and when I'm looking at requests for new personnel, the department-wide, county-wide is what I look at is, have they been fully staffed? And if, sorry. Please. It's only my 9th meeting today, so I'm a little tired. If we can't fill the positions in the departments that we already have, then I can't see how we can approve new positions. Now, if we have like HR, which they've been solid, they have had their 5 people and they need a 6th person, that I can understand. Same with building and grounds and stuff like that. So again, to look at the patrol deputies and not being able to staff what we have, I think is an issue. I do have a question on the Hayden patrol deputies though. So Sheriff, I understand that their funding is going up. Is that correct?
Yes, I've asked for a $300,000 in addition to from the 402 from last year.
Sure. So theoretically, they could be giving us $700,000.
Correct.
So does that fully cover those 3 additional positions?
Oh, no, the BOCC has approved for years. This contract is upside down for many, many years. And it's
Sure.
going to take many years for it to get to a level that we can adequately serve the residents of Hayden.
Sure.
I don't anticipate it happening overnight, but this has been going on when they had 3,500 people that lived in that community.
Sure. So what I would actually like to see is if you do end up fully staffed, come back to us mid-year and we can look at additional deputies. But to approve right now, it's kind of an overtaxation situation with the public because we can't tax them for people that we can't hire, if that makes sense. So,
I have Captain Deke here, and Captain Deke is part of our hiring process, and there's many times where we've had an applicant leave the process because when they look at the lateral rate that they're going to come over at, they can't afford to do this.
do they not see the rate before they apply? Do most people apply
Well,
and not even see what the rate is?
I asked the same question, but I believe that they believe that somewhere in that range that they would come over at a higher rate.
Right.
But
So we can't look at rates if we are spending money on new personnel that we probably won't be able to hire anyway.
well, you know, it's amazing that not one of you asked about the calls for service and about how our activity level is. I just came from a barricaded suspect, and we were done with the barricaded suspect. We had another barricade situation that didn't turn out to be a situation. We're coming off the busiest winter for critical events on record. Last night, the radio was nonstop. But I see your face that you really don't.
I did
really
ask.
don't-
I did ask.
Okay.
Calls for service by
Calls
hour.
are up.
Yeah.
Deployment of our Bearcat vehicle is up. There's a lot of resources that go into that. Our psychological calls for service are up. Our traffic collisions are up. Our family disturbances are up. I don't know, you explain to me how this county continues to grow. However, you think that we can continue to do more with less.
Show me that you can hire the people and I will fund more people.
Well,
That's what I'm talking
That's kind of an oxymoron.
No, I
Because-
don't think so.
Then give me a competitive wage that is comparable to other agencies in the Pacific Northwest.
And that's what we're trying to do with this wages. Until
That
June
does
14th,
not-
until,
That does not remove our need. These guys out in the field are getting ran ragged. I've got them working the jail, I got them working dispatch, I've got them answering calls for service. Something has to give here. This is not Mayberry anymore. I wish that this was still a county of 40,000. But it's not. And we had the most violent winter on record. So, I mean, I would like to be able to say, you know what, we can do it. We can be able to cut the budget by 20% this year. But this is a growing population. My jail population, the other day when I text you, it was 444. We don't even have certified beds in that range.
What are we certified for?
What are we certified for, the beds? 420?
451's our current bed capacity, but.
do you want to move on and address something else in the budget, or are you done?
What? I'm sorry, I can't hear.
361, but we have certified beds in about 410.
Did you say 461?
No. 361 is what the Idaho Sheriff Association recommends our capacity to be at.
Right, but
So, but
With,
Certified beds, about 410.
with current staffing levels.
Correct,
Yes.
correct.
Okay.
So it has to do with, staffing and square footage. So as you know, we had to close one of our pods because of our staffing. So I would like to be able to tell you this. I know I'm going to be in a very difficult position with these judges here very shortly. I mean, I don't know, short of calling the governor for National Guard people, I don't know what else to do. Because if we're at 444 now, and we're already housing 20 of those outside, I'm gonna be in a position where I tell them, I don't have
Yeah.
any place to put your people.
Okay, so what I hear you saying, if I hear you correctly, is I need to be able to pay these people. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct. But we're also the fastest growing county in the United States.
I understand that, okay? And that's why this is probably the largest single chunk of increase that we have ever done. We're playing catch-up, you know that, from prior administrations, but I don't want to go there. So the fact of the matter is, unless we make some other sacrifices in other areas of the budget, we can't balance this budget and bring in that $7.5 million. Let me give you an example. I sat with one individual yesterday in another department. It doesn't matter who it is. But just to give you an idea as to what level of increase we're looking at, this individual, if we pass this, which is the grade change along with the COLA, is looking at a $9,000 a year increase. And that is probably not going to be unusual at, let's say, her salary level, okay? That's what we're looking at. We are trying to do this, we're making every effort, but if we don't get the cuts in the other areas, in the final analysis, it's going to be left with us. And it's, back to Bill's point, it's easier if you guys look at it. You clearly know your business better than we do. But we have to bring this budget some way into balance and be able to do so and provide that increase that we're looking at.
And I didn't come here today to fight. I came here today to try to understand and to work together. And I think the best way we can work together is talk about things like, and I was going to ask about capacities and, intensities, because I want everybody to hear that. But those are realities that have to do with budget and the final analysis. So that's,
Well, I applaud the board for looking at the wages.
Yes.
I don't believe that any employee with the Kootenai County employees, period, will ever make more than anybody else. And certainly with the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office, I've said, hey, you're not going to be the highest paid law enforcement professional, whether you're sworn or professional staff. But we have to be close. So I applaud you looking at that. Now, we have seen other agencies within the county that last year asked for 4 officers. Boom, they got 4 officers. We are seeing a level of activity that you are stretching our resources so thin. It's going to be a scenario just like at 911 dispatch, where they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, that the light that they see is probably the train coming at them, and they don't want to continue to work 30 to 40 hours every couple of weeks of overtime. So they're probably will go somewhere else. But this was not, didn't happen overnight. But these are some of the things that, what do? Do I start limiting service to the residents? Do I start saying, hey, we can't respond to this, this, and this? Go online? Do I say, unless it's an emergency, call us back another day? Because the level of activity that we saw during the winter, and I was not being facetious about the barricaded suspect and the person with a gun with 2 occupants right now. I was not being facetious. So we have a activity problem and we have a growth problem. And I believe that we should take those in consideration, not just a spreadsheet.
What does your agency do right?
No, we have some of the best committed, dedicated employees in law enforcement anywhere.
Okay. And I think that's what we need the public to understand and to know, that this is a great place to work. And we're committed to helping you do this, but something's got to give. So I'm asking to take away the new ask for deputies, and if you are able to be fully staffed, then we can look at getting additional deputies on board.
But that question is somewhat of a, it doesn't make sense to me.
Dan Matos, in one of our budget seasons in the last 3 years, I asked him, in your 20-something years here, how long were you full? He told me 8 hours. There was one time, one day, 8 hours, patrol was full. So until we can get people to fill the positions we have, I can't tax the residents for additional positions that we can't fill.
And so my statement to that would be, is to pay a competitive wage to other agencies in the Pacific Northwest, and we'll be full.
And
And let us go back to some of those other lateral candidates and say, hey, let's offer you this.
And we're trying to do that, but we can't do both. We're trying to get there. And I know it's not fast enough and it's not in the manner that you want us to, but we are trying to get there because Kootenai County is a great place to work and we recognize that. So next week, June 14th, we're going to know, not with 100%, I think there'll be some tweaking to go forward, but we will have good figures with the wage study and what different departments we'll be looking at.
So just for the record, how many deputies do you think that I need to increase staffing by one?
You mean how many?
Whether it's patrol or,
You mean how many do you have?
how many do I need?
You mean like to interview?
No, to have on staff, to have as part of our working force.
I don't know that I can answer that. I guess that,
I don't understand the question.
no.
Okay, so at another department, say like the clerk's office, just because I'm looking at Ronnie and it says clerk there. If we hire an employee there, that employee covers 40 hours a week? Okay. But I don't get to cover 40 hours a week. I have to cover 168 hours a week. So with today's current work ethic and FMLA, on average, I have to have about 5.5 deputies to make sure I have one person for 168 hours.
This is an amateur question, but when you have an area that you assign to patrol, when you have an area that you assign to patrol, is it always the same strength of patrol, or sometimes at certain times of the day or certain days of the week, does it go down?
Sure.
Well, we try to have more deputies out on the field when the calls for service and the activity are higher. So that's generally from 3 o'clock till about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning,
I just figure you'd know that,
right?
and you do.
So that's generally how we do our deployment. But, you know, when I explain this to the public, they don't realize that it's a 168-hour-a-week operation. Day shift in the jail is actually your busier shift than our early morning shift because you have 3 feedings. You have to feed the inmates 3 times. They're going back to and from court and medical appointments and what have you. So we have to adjust our deployment on those shifts because it's busier. So, but we run several 168-hour operations, so it's hard to explain. When I tell people, well, or when they ask me, why is law enforcement such a big part of a budget? Well, because take another segment and times it by 3, plus
That's a good point.
some more, and then you'll say, oh, well, we didn't realize that you have a 24-hour operation that you have to cover.
So let's do this. We've got results coming out next week, which hopefully will address, if not all, certainly some of your concerns, okay? In the meantime, while we're doing this, or Sylvia's preparing to come out with that information, I'm asking, please just take another look at the
Sure.
budget, please.
Sure.
So that we can work together and come up with something. You have a valid concern, Sheriff, and we want to help you try to solve this problem.
We will solve it. We have to solve it.
We have to solve it. So please bear with us. Let's go another week. Let's see what's happening. Let's see what we can put together for wages and see if we can't
This is
get
good
even
to
more
look
competitive.
at, Yeah.
Okay.
Fair enough, sir?
Yes, absolutely. Is there anything you want to cover
While we're here?
now? Yeah, while we're here?
Yes.
Yeah, Leslie, I
In the
think that-
new programs, it has a license plate system, $25,000.
Oh, that's an IT new program request? That's something that our IT division is requesting.
Okay, so how does that fit into, let's see, where were we here?
You're looking at the handout?
Yeah, front page of the handout.
So it looks like Cheryl Hallgren submitted that request for them. Do you want me to kind of go through her documentation behind that request?
Sure.
Okay. She said the current access to the automated license plate system throughout Kootenai County is obtained through Post Falls Police Department. Twice in the past year, because of their unanticipated downtime, we have lost access to this vital investigatory tool. She said this would ensure that we are responsible for the system and not reliant upon another agency. She said, I have applied for a Homeland Security grant for this project. If that is not approved, it will have to be a budget item.
So
So-
as you know, we've had a law enforcement agency in recent memory that has been hacked twice. And they host this license plate recognition software. So it has been restricted from our use for months on end. So I don't know if that's part of that.
It is.
Okay. But the grant's been applied for, or there's a potential grant?
She just said she's applied for it. I haven't heard if she's been awarded any funds.
It
Sure.
hasn't.
Okay.
Not yet.
So that would be one thing to wait for the grants, the grant funding. Spillman contract increase, 55,000, is that for any additional services, or that's just the
She
increase?
said that it was underquoted quite a bit last year.
I'm sorry, was it what, under?
It was like
Underquoted.
underquoted.
Oh,
For
okay.
a lot from last year, and so it needed to be bumped up to make it accurate, and that's what she did this year.
Okay.
I have a question. Okay, so regarding the the additional patrol officers, patrol deputies, the cops grants, I don't know that, my understanding is I don't think we've applied for those yet. Nancy, can you elaborate on those grants? What's involved?
What's involved, you have
With
to
the
submit an application.
Okay,
But they do pay for the hiring of new officers, up to 75% of the salary.
for how long?
3 years,
For 3 years.
yes.
That's something probably worth looking at. Is that in fact what it's called, a COPS grant?
Cops hiring grant, yes, sir.
Okay. Sheriff, are you familiar with it?
Oh, I'm familiar with cops grants, yeah.
Worth our time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, no,
Okay. That's something we need to look at and pursue.
And then there's admin, $100,000 for relocation and hiring bonuses. If we're paying relocation and hiring bonuses, it's because we've got empty chairs, and so I rather use salary savings to fund those things. And if we get to that tipping point where we're like, okay, we don't have any money left because we're full enough, but we still have open positions, then we can come back before the board and we can address that then. But I would take that 100,000 out at this point. Unless, has it been funded to a certain level in the past? Okay.
No, I don't show that they've had any. They have some other bonus accounts in other budgets, but through that one, no.
Okay.
As you know, the demand for law enforcement officers is extremely high. Our neighbor here in Spokane has a $25,000 lateral bonus. So I just, maybe now is the right time to offer something like that because of the ARPA funds available, but if you want to take it out for right now, but I just think it's something that we shouldn't shut the door on.
I'm not saying shutting the door on the process, I'm saying take it out of the budget. We can use money from somewhere else.
Presumably, he's experienced, right? It's a lateral?
Yes, laterals are peace officers in another state or jurisdiction, and then they want to come over to ours. And it could be dispatchers are also certified and what have you, or
Okay.
jail deputies also.
Okay. Anything else, Leslie?
Commissioners, I do know that Stephanie prepared a little presentation for you as an overall to their budgets if you're interested in what she has to say.
Sure.
I don't have to. No, it was just it was a summary overview. I
Okay.
didn't know how much in depth we were gonna go into personnel because we are having that meeting next week. But we just kind of wanted to bring to your attention what we're asking for. So I didn't know what you were gonna cut now and what we were waiting for. And then I just kind of did highlights of each division on why their numbers, what the big reason was their numbers went up this year.
Sure. So when we're talking about uniforms, huge pet peeve of mine. I don't mind reallocating the money to the jumpsuits, but why are we increasing it when I understand that there's a closet full of uniforms? And I think mostly they like to wear the jumpsuits.
You're talking patrol. I guess before it was a $250, what's the word I'm looking for?
Stipend.
Stipend allowance. And now patrol's asking that we bump that to $350.
That's
So
fine,
that's the
but you
$10,000 increase.
got to lower the amount that's spent on class ZYPT, whatever all your acronyms are. Class A's, Class B's, all that kind of stuff. So if you can lower that budget by 10 grand and then put 10 grand towards the jumpsuits, I think that's fine. But supplying both when they're not using them, then I think that's probably.
Does patrol want to speak to that or no?
Commissioner, I think it's worth looking at. I have asked Marcy, our purchaser, on that to look at that, but we want to try to set ourselves up for a Class A uniform, that is for our special events and stuff like that, and still then have a uniform for the Class C or jumpsuit uniforms. And so we're not there yet. We do have some extra supply of the pants and shirts, but we want to set up our duty belts as well, so you have a nice polished Class A duty belt and then a daily worn duty belt because they get scratched up and stuff like that. So we still, I would say for this year, we still need that to get over the hurdle to get those duty belts set up as well, because that's additional cuff cases, holsters, and mag pouches.
And I would say I'd rather pay your people more so we can get more people here and not have them look all fancy.
Well, you'd have to talk to the sheriff then about his Class A uniforms, but there are events that we need those for.
Sure.
they need to look fancy in many forums that we go to.
I know,
so that
I
we
was in
are-
law enforcement for 10 years, I know.
ourselves apart from others, and we look the cream of the crop, and that's what those Class A's are designed for, and that's why if we're wearing them on the street on a daily basis, and then we try to tell them to come to a Class A event and look the best and, show that we're the leading agency in our area, we can't, because they're out there scuffing up the same gear that we're asking them to keep polished and and that's why we're trying to do the separation. We have a Class A uniform that is squared away, good to go, and we have their daily wear. It'd be no different than you saying, I have a closet of just regular clothes, but I try to filter and wear those for the fanciest time that I need. No, average person would go out there and get a new tux or a new suit or a new dress for this event and have their regular clothes over here on the side.
And the average person isn't asking their neighbor to pay for it. So I'm just saying, if we're talking priorities, that's all I'm saying. If we're talking priorities, can you find $10,000 in that budget so you can fund the daily wears and work a little bit longer to fund the Class A's? I had to buy all my own Class A stuff in California. So it's a little odd to me to come here and that we're paying for both.
We have
So-
competitive agencies that are buying much of their other stuff, their boots that we don't, their, gloves that we don't.
Ironically, in one breath, you say what sets us apart and why does somebody want to work for the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office? And in another breath, you're saying, well, why would you work for this agency that doesn't look sharp? I went to an event today with all other law enforcement agencies in Kootenai County. So you don't want us to look professional in front of all the other law enforcement agencies?
It's not what I'm saying at all.
Okay,
I'm
well-
saying if you want to get paid more, then we have to make some adjustments. We have to get creative. We have to look at some of these different things.
We're not the only agency in law enforcement in the United States that has a Class A uniform and a Class B uniform and/or a Class C uniform. So this is not an industry oxymoron. So if you want your agency, which, by the way, happens to be the face of Kootenai County, they see a deputy sheriff at these events or out in the field much more than they see any other employee of any other department, period.
So I guess I'm confused. Are they wearing their Class A's on a daily basis when they see all these people?
No, you don't wear the Class A on a daily basis because it doesn't wear like your jumpsuits.
But isn't that where the deputies see the most people, is on a daily basis? See, I think it's silly to argue. All I'm saying is, look, here's an area where we can maybe have some movement. I will be happy to continue to go down this, or if you want to do like the other commissioners have suggested, come back with your own cuts so we can focus on pay and not have these discussions, then that probably would be a good opportunity.
It's unbelievable that you want to spend $24 million of taxpayer money on a building, but we're having this discussion on $10,000.
I look at it differently. I care about uniforms and Class A's and Class this. I think we are picking nits. We're being nitpickers. What we should do is go figure it out, come back, then let's
Which was my suggestion, Bob.
talk.
Take another look at
Because it
it.
doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna argue.
It-
I'm not
it-
gonna argue with you.
It's difficult for us to go through line item because we don't know your needs as well as you do. All we're saying is, we're trying to give the highest priority to wages, and we can't do that if we can't bring down the costs in other areas. Ultimately, and I don't want this to come across wrong, but ultimately, it's our decision. But I don't want to make that decision in an autocratic or dictatorial fashion. I'd rather make it in a collaborative way to say, help us out here. Where do you think you can reduce so that we can go ahead and implement these increases? That's it. That's what we're trying to do and get this budget balanced.
We'll get there.
Is there a number we're looking at, like, that we
Well-
need to be aiming for to?
Well, right now, we're about 5.4 million over. Now, clearly, you can't make that up,
Right.
okay? What I started, and the two areas that I focused on were basically your personnel A budget, which is coming in at I'm just gonna round it off, 1.76 million, okay? That's the 10 patrol deputies. And then leaving your B budget pretty much intact because most of that is medical. Of that 897, I think 650,000 or thereabouts is medical. I'm not looking at the bonuses. And then when we go to OPEX or B budget, 1.875 mil, we've got 10 patrol vehicles and associated equipment in there, and there's some other items. So between those two, between A and B, we've got about, if my math is right, 3.6 million. Now, those being the largest chunks, logically, from a financial standpoint, that's where you want to focus to see where you can make reductions. That's what I'm
So
trying to say.
when do you suggest we get together again and do this?
Well, we've got a timeline. We need to finalize this by the beginning of July. What are we thinking, next week? Or is that too soon? Is it
Well-
better to get the info from Sylvia and go yet another week?
Well, we can do it a couple different ways. They can just submit cuts, that's fine. And
Okay.
then we're going to have our meeting on June 14th to go through a budget specifically. And then if there's a reason to bring back the sheriff again, then we can schedule that.
Okay?
We just need 24-hour notice, so it's not a huge,
Okay, so what you're thinking is what, a week from today, submit the reductions?
yeah, if they find any, if they have any.
Can you do that?
Yeah, you wanna do it?
Yeah.
We'll take it back and look at it.
Yeah, because attached to that 1.7 in personnel is also 1.7 million in onboarding. So if the personnel goes away, that's actually 3.4 right there.
And where does the onboarding appear? Is that part of the 1.87?
The onboarding is part of new programs.
Okay,
Yep, so
so it's part of the 1.875?
yeah. So
Okay.
their budget for new programs, that's pretty
you
much
go.
10 cars, yeah.
And there's an interesting point I think that the sheriff made. When you talk about the lateral, the bonus, the stipend, whatever it is, who's to say we can't take that up? Not necessarily, I don't know that we can necessarily budget, maybe we can depending on the degree of reductions. But when we get into it next year, if that's what it takes, because if you're looking at a stipend, that's basically a one-time shot. So essentially that has less of an impact to the budget than trying to go out and staff, I shouldn't say staff, you would need to staff, but in terms of actually giving substantial wage increases where you don't have the recurring source of revenue.
HR has been suggesting about hiring bonuses.
So that is an option. And that's an option where we can go fund balance. Okay then? Are we good? Next week, okay?
So how much are we looking specifically?
3.6 million. Most is in a personnel request. Okay. Go back and look at it.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. I appreciate it. Do we have public comment? 3:40, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.